This happened back when I was in my first year of college. I had moved to Right Pier City for my studies and was living in a hostel at the time. One night, a few of my friends and I decided to go out. Luckily, I had brought my scooter from home when I moved, which made traveling around easier. Of course, sneaking out of the hostel at night wasn't easy, but I had built a good relationship with the warden, and that night he helped us. There were 4 of us to start: me, Halor, Chae, and Aditya. 2 of our female friends, Neha and Soohyeon, were going to meet us later. It took them a little while, but eventually they arrived at the spot we told them to. Now we had 2 scooters and 6 people, so we split up. Chae offered to drive Neha and Soohyeon, while I drove my scooter with Halor and Aditya. As we were getting ready to go, I asked Neha where we were headed. She just smiled and said,
"Just follow us."
It was winter, and the chill in the air made it harder to ride comfortably at midnight, but we managed. After a while, I started noticing how far out of the city we were. That's when Aditya asked Neha.
"Where are we going?"
Neha responded that she knew of a mall, one that had been abandoned and was rumored to be haunted. That's when things started to feel off. Halor didn't like the sound of it. Honestly, neither did I, but we'd already come this far, and I didn't want to be the only one to ruin the night, so I agreed. But Aditya leaned toward me and whispered,
"Look at Soohyeon."
I turned to look, and something was definitely wrong. Her face was pale, and she looked uneasy. I asked,
"Soohyeon, are you okay? Feeling sick?"
She shook her head.
"No, I'm not sick, but something's not right. I have a really bad feeling. We should turn back."
Neha snapped at her.
"Shut up, or we'll leave you here in this forest."
Before I could respond, Halor suddenly asked me to stop the scooter. He said he wasn't feeling well, so I pulled over. Chae, riding behind us, stopped as well. Aditya gave Halor some water while he sat down on a milestone nearby. We started chatting and began coming up with reasons why the mall had been abandoned. Then, out of nowhere, Soohyeon let out a scream, a loud scream. It startled all of us. Halor choked on his water and stood up abruptly. Soohyeon began to cry. I rushed to her, grabbing her arms.
"What happened?"
I asked. Her voice trembled.
"We need to leave now, please."
Neha was furious.
"Stop acting childish."
She shouted, but this time Soohyeon shouted back.
"You need to stop this. I'm not joking anymore."
That was all I needed to hear. I told Soohyeon to get on the scooter. We all climbed back on and headed toward town. The ride was quiet, tense. Soohyeon was clinging to Chae so tightly, it made me a little jealous, I won't lie, but it also showed just how terrified she was. Around 5:30 a.m., we stopped at a tea stall. As soon as we parked, Soohyeon rushed to a chair and sat down. We gathered around her, still shaken. I asked,
"Are you okay now? Do you want some water or food?"
She shook her head, staring blankly.
"No, just let me sit here."
Chae moved closer and gently asked,
"What did you see?"
At first, she said nothing, but then, as if reliving it, her face turned pale again. What she told us still gives me goosebumps. She said that as we entered the outer forest area, she had noticed something, or someone, a woman, hiding behind the trees. At first, she couldn't get a good look because we were riding, but when we stopped and Halor sat on that milestone, she saw the woman clearly. She said the woman was standing right beside Halor. Her legs were bent at strange angles, her eyes pure white. Her skin was pale and lifeless. We were all frozen, especially Halor. He just stood there, replaying the exact moment in his head. Since that night, I've stopped venturing to the outskirts after dark, because sometimes you don't know what's watching you from the trees. I lived with my grandmother for a large part of my life. Across the street from her house lived a woman, her neighbor, who always looked at us in a strange way. She hated our family, and I still don't know why. She didn't hide it either. You could see it in her eyes, in the way she glared, like we'd done something unforgivable. But then, in 2015, when I was 8 years old, something unexpected happened. That same woman called me over to her front yard. She was smiling. It was the first time she'd ever acted friendly. I was an innocent, naive child, so I crossed the street without hesitation. She was holding a doll, a big one, around 3 feet tall. It had blonde, shoulder-length hair with bangs and looked just like one of those old dolls from the 80s or 90s. She gave it to me, and I accepted it. Why wouldn't I? I brought the doll home and showed it to my family. They thought it was odd that she'd suddenly act nice, but no one really questioned it. Days passed, and for no clear reason, I started to feel afraid of that doll. I didn't want to be near it. I couldn't look it in the face. My mom and aunt thought it was funny. They'd play little pranks like putting the doll next to my bed holding a fork while I was asleep. It wasn't meant to scare me. They always cared about me. But to me, it wasn't funny. I was terrified. And then, strange things started happening. My grandmother had already been struggling with depression after losing a close relative. But after the doll came into our house, her condition rapidly worsened. She began having hallucinations. She stopped recognizing people, even me, even my mother and aunt. The only person she recognized was my uncle. She would talk about seeing the house on fire. She told us she saw me and my cousins lying dead in the kitchen. She walked aimlessly through the house, never speaking clearly. There was always a worried, almost haunted look in her eyes. She wasn't herself anymore. It was like something had taken over. My family started to believe something spiritual was happening. We brought in a pastor to bless the house. We even called a medium from Umbanda, an Afro-Brazilian religion, to try and expel whatever was there. During one of these sessions, my mom, who has always been spiritually sensitive, said she felt a hand around her neck, trying to choke her. Eventually, my grandmother had to be admitted into a psychiatric hospital. Even there, the hallucinations continued. She believed the doctors were trying to kill her. She begged not to be left alone. And that doll, the one that the neighbor gave me, my uncle took it and threw it away somewhere along the road. To this day, I don't know what was inside that doll, and I don't know if our neighbor cursed it, but it's the only explanation that makes sense. My grandmother is okay now. She's stable, but she has to take a lot of medication to stay that way. We don't talk much about it anymore, but it's something none of us will ever forget. And that woman, that neighbor who gave us those dirty looks, she still lives across from my grandmother's house, and she still looks at us with hate. And once, she even tried to run me over with her car. I just wish I knew why. Why did she do this to us? Hi, my name is Nikola, and I live in Bulgaria. This happened when I was just 7 years old. I was staying at my grandma's house in our village during the winter. It was a small, quiet place where everyone knew each other. One night, I was out in the center of the village with my cousins and a couple of friends. We ate, we played, and as the night went on, it got later than usual. Eventually, it was time to go home. Now, our house was at the very edge of the village, and to get there, we had to walk down this long, dark road. There were houses along the way, sure, but it was still pitch black. The street lamps were there, but they didn't work. As we were walking home, we noticed a man standing by the road, all by himself. At first, we thought nothing of it, until we got closer. He didn't look right. His posture was off. His eyes were hazy. He was drunk. And as we walked past him, he looked directly at my youngest cousin. She was only 5. And said something under his breath. "You're a cute kid. Want to come to my house? I'll give you some candy." I froze. Then I grabbed her hand and started dragging her along with me and my other cousin, who was 6 at the time. We didn't say anything. We just walked faster. And the man, he just stood there, watching us. By the time we got to our house, my heart was racing. We had a gate in front, and it was locked. I quickly helped my cousins jump over it. It wasn't that tall, so I jumped over too. I grabbed the key from under the rug, opened the door, shoved everyone inside, including myself, and locked it. The house was silent. Everyone was asleep. even my grandma. We made our way up to the 3rd floor. That's where our room was. I grabbed some firewood along the way and lit the metal oven to keep us warm. And once everything felt safe again, I turned out the lights. But something told me to look outside, some feeling I had in my stomach, and I listened to it. I pulled back the curtain, and there he was, that same man, just standing there, staring. We made eye contact. I didn't want to scare my cousins. They were already drifting off to sleep, so I closed the blinds and went to bed, laying in between my cousins. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next day, I didn't see the man anywhere outside, and for a while, I let myself believe it was over. But a few days later, I had to go to my other grandma's house to deliver some things, and as I got there, I overheard a few people talking, and what I heard made my blood run cold. They said a man had been arrested the night before. He'd followed a young girl through the village and tried to break into her house. They had found him armed with a knife. In that moment, everything clicked. That man, he wasn't just some drunk villager. He was hunting. And if I hadn't grabbed my cousins and locked the door in time, God only knows what would have happened to us. My name is Yuma, and I live in a small city in India. My best friend Raj and I were beyond excited when we managed to convince my parents to let us have a week-long sleepover to kick off our summer vacation. My parents, both doctors, had to attend an urgent conference, so we had the house all to ourselves. We spent the day having a blast, prank calling, doing our nails, trying our new makeup looks, and just enjoying the freedom. As night fell, we decided to watch a movie and finally called it a night around 2 a.m. We went upstairs to my bedroom, but of course, being teenagers, the chatter didn't stop. Everything was perfectly normal until Raj suddenly went quiet and whispered,
Did you hear that? Hear what?
I asked, a bit confused.
The rustling of the doorknob,
she said. I brushed it off at first, but a few minutes later, I heard it too. That soft, eerie sound made both of our faces turn pale. But then, as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. I looked out the window, but there was no one there. We tried to go back to our conversation, but the unease lingered. It's all we could think about. Out of nowhere, a loud crash from downstairs shattered the silence. It sounded like something had toppled over. We were paralyzed with fear, clinging to each other, our minds racing. Raj decided to call her mom, who lived just a few blocks away. In a panic, she rushed over, telling us to stay locked in the room until she arrived. She knew where we kept the spare key, so she was able to let herself in. As we waited, we heard the unmistakable sound of a vase shattering near my bedroom. We were terrified and convinced we were in real danger. Then, the front door unlocked. Raj's mom arrived, and as she came upstairs, she knocked on the door, reassuring us that everything was fine. When we opened the door, she was laughing, telling us that a stray cat had somehow gotten inside. We were dumbfounded, but then remembered we had left a window open earlier. We laughed it off, but still shaken. We decided to spend the night at Raj's place instead. The next morning, over a lazy breakfast, a chilling thought hit me. I turned to Raj, my face drained of color, and quietly said,
If it was just a cat, how did it fiddle with the doorknob?
The realization left us both speechless. I live in Bangalore, India, and this is a true story that happened to me when I was 13 years old. One night, around 8 o'clock, I was lying face down on my bed, my eyes closed, music playing softly in my ears. Suddenly, I felt a sharp tug on my toes. I turned and looked toward the corner of the bed, and that's when I saw it. A pale hand, just barely visible, quickly slipped back under the bed. At first, I thought it had to be my dad. He loved to play pranks on me and scare me sometimes. I got up, knocked on the mattress with both hands, and said,
Dad, I know you're under there. Don't scare me.
In response, I heard a knock coming from under the bed. Still laughing a little, I knocked again, louder this time.
Dad, come out! Come out now!
I called, but then I heard my dad's voice, far away outside.
What's going on?
He was still outside fixing the fence, and the only door to the backyard was too far away. There was no way he could have gotten outside that fast. My mom was in the kitchen making dinner, and my brother was away in another city. I froze. My heart was pounding. I bolted from the room. When I tried to tell my family what had happened, no one believed me. They said it must have been my imagination. But I know what I saw. I saw the hand move under the bed. Even if it was just my imagination, what about the knocking sound I heard from underneath? I'm 19 years old now, and I still wonder what was under the bed that night. But honestly, I'm just glad I didn't look. Hello, Wansee. You can call me Billy. I'm a black Indian girl living in Suriname with my parents, and at the time, my grandmother. This happened when I was about 7 years old. I used to share a room with my 14-year-old sister, who we'll call Tiffany. Our room was on the second floor. Now, as a kid, I'd always see things that felt a little off, but I never really thought anything of it until this night. I was asleep on the top bunk. Tiffany was on the bottom. In the middle of the night, I woke up for no reason. I glanced around the room, then looked at the clock. It read 3 a.m. My bed faced a window, and because of the balcony light outside, the curtain was just see-through enough to make out shapes. I was just about to drift back to sleep when I looked over, and I saw it. A small, childlike hand pressed against the window, just resting there behind the curtain. I was petrified. I went to a Christian school, so the first thing I did was hide under my blanket and start praying. I prayed so hard I couldn't even think straight. The next morning, my eyes immediately went to the curtain, but there was no sign of a hand. But here's the thing, we were on the top floor. It was impossible for anyone to be standing outside our window. I never told anyone about what I saw. I was 7, and I knew no one would believe me. That night, I hesitated, but I went to bed anyway. And again, I woke up in the middle of the night. My eyes landed on the window, that same childlike hand, pressed against the glass. Just a hand, no arm, no shadow, just a hand. This time, I whispered, "Tiffany, Tiffany," trying to wake her up, but she didn't move. I lay there, frozen with fear, unable to sleep. I hid under my covers again and prayed to God to please make it go away. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up, the sun was shining through the curtains, but I was still shaken. Later that evening, I went to the upstairs living room where my grandmother stayed. She was the only person I felt I could talk to. At first, she was skeptical, but the more I told her, the more seriously she listened. I've always been a grandma's girl. It was easy to tell her everything. She handed me a small Bible and told me to keep it under my pillow. I didn't want to tell my parents. I knew they wouldn't believe me. And when I finally did, I was right. They laughed and told me it was just a dream, my imagination. That night, I fell asleep with the Bible still under my pillow, and for the first time, I slept peacefully. No hand, no waking up. Now that I'm older, I've learned more about the legends in my country, and I realized that hand I saw, it was most likely a bakru, a small childlike creature from our folklore. It has all the same characteristics of a child, but isn't. And if you think that was the end of my experience with the paranormal, think again. This was just the beginning. My name is Carol, and I want to share with you a true story that has haunted me since 2010, when I was just 14 years old. Back then, I lived in a quiet apartment complex called Questons Avenue. It had 5 buildings. I lived in the B building on the first floor. Directly across from my building was the D building, where I used to attend tuition classes. And just beside the D building, there was a small, obscure security door. It was always closed. I had never seen anyone use it. It felt like it had been forgotten. By the residents, by the guards, by everyone. My daily routine was uneventful. I'd leave for class around 4:30 p.m., and by 6:30 I'd be on my way home. The walk from my building to the D building took about 20 minutes, time I usually spent daydreaming or chatting with friends. One evening, after class, my friend and I walked out together. We were laughing, sharing snacks she'd brought along, but she soon had to leave for another class, and I was left alone, slowly finishing the last few bites on my way home. That's when I noticed him, a man, tall, gaunt, and unnerving, emerging from that strange security door, the one no one ever used. His movements were off, like he was struggling to control his own body. His limbs twitched, and his walk was very jerky. Each stride looked stranger than the last, and he was looking down at his feet the whole time, almost as if he knew that he was walking in a strange manner. But then he looked up, and his eyes met mine. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. His face was unsettling. His eyes were too wide apart, and his jaw hung at a crooked angle, like it wasn't aligned with the rest of his face. He stared at me. I tried to ignore him, focused on my snack, but then he moved. He didn't just walk toward me, he lurched, and his slow stagger turned into a predatory stride. Before I could react, he was right behind me, yanking my bag with so much force it nearly pulled me off balance. I spun around. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. Up close, he was horrifying. Those same wide, bulging eyes, that distorted jaw, and a twisted grin full of something I can only describe as malice. "Do you have any money in your bag?" he asked. His voice was a low, gravelly rasp that made my skin crawl. No, I don't," I stammered, my hands shaking. He didn't blink. He stared, deep and cold. Then his eyes darted to the nearby benches, where a few people had started watching us. Their concerned expressions seemed to break the spell for a moment. That's when he laughed, but not like a normal person. It was a hollow, mocking laugh, like something pretending to sound human. "Why are you so scared?" That was enough for me. I yanked my bag from his grip and ran. I ran as fast as I could back to my building, all the way to my front door. When I got home, I was out of breath and terrified. I told my parents everything. They were horrified and told me that if I ever saw the man again, I was to call them immediately. They wouldn't hesitate to report him, but I never saw him again. A few days later, one of my friends said she saw the same man I described. She thought he might have been drunk, considering there were a few liquor shops nearby. She said that after I left, his face turned pale, and he stumbled back to that same security door, the one he came out of, and then vanished. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but that image of his face, that moment he grabbed my bag, still lingers in my mind. This happened about a month ago when my siblings and I arrived in Mexico to visit family. It was only our 4th day there when we visited my step-grandmother's family in a town called San Pedro. It was beautiful. There was a big park in the center of town, and my step-grandmother's family owned a tiny restaurant right across from it. I asked my grandpa if we could go buy a volleyball. He said yes, so we went out, bought one, and came back. That's when we were introduced to our step-cousin. Let's call her Rose. She was super friendly and offered to show us around. She led us to the volleyball nets in the park. The court had a big net around it so the ball couldn't go flying off, and there were other people playing behind us. We started a game and we were having fun until my little sister pointed something out. She said there was a guy walking around the court and that he had been waving at her earlier. I looked over and saw him sitting on a bench outside the court, close to where we were playing. I didn't think much of it at first. There were a lot of people around, but now that I think about it, it was strange how he chose to sit so close to us when there were plenty of empty benches. The time was 10:34 p.m. when we decided to head back to the restaurant. That's when Rose asked if we wanted to explore another park, one that was behind the restaurant, up a small hill. We said sure, and she led the way. As we were walking uphill, Rose stopped to point out the mountains that surrounded San Pedro. She started telling us stories about how she'd climbed them all before, and we all listened as we kept walking. When we got to the second park, we were still getting to know Rose. It was our first time meeting her after all. But my brother started acting off. While we all sat on the grass, he stood. He didn't say why, but looking back, it makes sense now. While we were chatting, my little sister suddenly asked,
"Did you guys see that guy too?"
We all looked at her.
"The guy from the volleyball court,"
she said.
"He was waving at me."
And then, just as she said it, he showed up. We all froze. He walked into the park and sat at the back, but slowly started making his way closer to us. Rose stood up and said,
"Let's move."
We were all aware of him now. We moved to the opposite end of the park where he had been sitting. Then he started heading in our direction once again. That's when Rose said,
"Run!"
And we did. We sprinted out of the park, running left. The guy ran right, and then he vanished. We couldn't see him anymore. I'll be honest, at first I was laughing. I thought it was all just some weird moment. My older sister laughed too, but my little sister, she was shaking, almost in tears. My brother was quiet and calm, but I could tell he was angry. I held my little sister and told her,
"It's okay, he didn't follow us."
Rose, still catching her breath, kept saying she'd never seen that guy before. Nothing like that had ever happened to her. We decided to go back to the restaurant. Our family was there. It felt safer. But just as we turned the corner, my little sister screamed,
"He's right there! That's him!"
The guy suddenly jumped over the fence and started running full speed at us. Rose and my little sister sprinted toward the restaurant. My brother stood his ground and told me and my sister to run. But I froze. He was right there, standing in front of us. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a weird encounter anymore. This was dangerous. I grabbed my sister's hand and my brother said, "Go." He stayed behind to block the guy's path. We ran. I remember hearing my brother say, "I don't want any problems." When we got to the restaurant, my sister and I were telling our grandpa and Rose's cousin what had happened. Rose was shaking as she explained everything. Her mom and my step-grandmother rushed over and asked what was going on. I checked on my little sister. She was in tears. I hugged her and told her she was safe now. Eventually, my grandpa, Rose's cousin, and my brother came back. Rose's cousin explained that the guy was yelling at my brother, claiming his house was right there where my brother had stood. But Rose's cousin said he didn't live there. He lived further away. I asked my brother if he was okay. He said yeah, but the guy tried to pick a fight and then flipped him off. But the guy didn't leave it at that. He ran across the road, tore a branch off a tree, and screamed like a maniac, staring right at us the whole time. We believed he was on something, just by the way he walked and acted, but we'll never really know. It might not sound scary to someone else, but that night left us shaking. And the worst part, he had a bag with him. And to this day, I can't stop wondering what could have been inside it. We were lucky we didn't see him again, and the rest of the trip was safe, but we were always looking over our shoulder. Let this be a reminder, always be aware of your surroundings and who is watching you. My name is Theodore, and I come from Greece. I want to share a horror experience that happened about 10 years ago when I was about 11 or 12 years old. It was the holidays, and we were staying at my grandparents' house. My brother and I usually slept in the double bed in the living room, the one that faced the front door. But that night, we slept in the guest room because our grandma had recently broken her back and needed the double bed. The guest room had 2 single beds. The one I took was right next to the window, which faced the road outside. We turned off the lights, shut the blinds, and laid down to sleep at about 11 p.m. Then, in the middle of the night, I woke up. I could hear something. there was a tapping sound at the window. I was immediately uneasy. I tried to wake up my brother, but he was still sleeping. At first, I thought it might be our cousin Mila. She lived in the apartment just above my grandma's and was much older than us. Mila often came home drunk during the summer and sometimes forgot her keys. I figured she might be trying to get our attention so we could let her in. "Mila?" I called out. No answer. I got up and crept quietly into the living room, careful not to wake up my grandma. I opened the front door and stepped outside. No one was there. But then I looked at the guest room window. That's when I saw them. Long scratch marks made by fingernails streaking across the glass. Whoever had been tapping on the window wasn't doing it gently. It was aggressive. I rushed back inside, locked the door behind me, and went back to the guest room. I crawled into bed, heart pounding, and then it started again. Tap, tap, tap. Right outside the window. I ducked under the sheets, frozen. I wanted so badly to open the blinds and see who or what was out there, but something deep in my gut told me not to. I stayed like that for what felt like forever, until I finally passed out from fear and exhaustion. In the morning, I asked my grandma if Mila had come home yet. She looked confused and told me, "No, Mila's out of town for the whole week." That made my blood run cold. The town we were in is small, so small it barely counts as a town at all. It's more like a village. There's no hotel, no place for strangers to stay overnight. The closest town with a place to sleep is Varda, and that's about an hour and a half away. Whoever was outside my window that night wasn't a stranger passing through. They had to be someone local. At the time, I thought it might be a prank. There were only 2 other kids around, a pair of siblings who, like us, were there just for the holidays. They were loud, annoying, and always trying to mess with me and my brother. So I walked down the street to their house and rang the doorbell. No answer. I asked one of the neighbors about them, and they told me,
"Oh, that family left 2 days ago. Went back to the capital."
So if it wasn't Mila, and it wasn't the only other kids in town, then who was tapping on our window? To this day, I still don't know, and I'm glad I never opened those blinds. God only knows what I would have seen.
Hi, my name is Malaysia. I'm here to tell you a true story that happened to me when I was about 7 or 8-ish years old. Back then, in 2011, a tornado had hit our house. The damage was bad enough that I was sent to stay with my grandma for a few weeks until everything went back to normal. One day, my grandma had had almost all of her grandchildren over to stay the night. Let's call them Marcus, Leah, Amia, Rico, and Nina. We all slept on the floor on pallets. I woke up in the middle of the night. The time on the cable box was 3:20, 3:40, something like that. Everyone else was sleeping, and I watched the TV for a little bit, when my attention drifted towards this dark hallway, though I really wasn't sure why. After about 2 minutes, a figure appeared. It looked just like my grandpa, with a huge stomach, sort of a long head, but there was something off. The figure was much lighter than him. My grandpa was really dark-skinned. He seemed to walk in a strange way, more of like a limp. And something else strange was that he was walking towards my uncle's room, right across from the room he and my grandma shared. He never went in there. Being the curious little child that I was, I called out to him like, "Papa?" The figure stopped as soon as it heard my voice, slowly turned my way. Once I got a good look at his face, my heart dropped. It wasn't him. It was something else. The figure charged my way. Terrified, I hid under the covers, forcing myself to try to go to sleep. When I woke up again around 12 or 1, later than all of my cousins, I tried to explain to them what had happened, and they just laughed at me and said they didn't believe me, except Amia, who was very quiet. When all of my cousins got up to make themselves something to eat, I looked over at Amia. She looked back at me with fear in her eyes and said, "I saw it too." This story is very much real. When I'm sitting alone thinking about it, I remember it. I can't believe I remember it to this day. I'm 20 now, and I still refuse to sleep without a blanket over my head and my bedroom door closed.
Hey Wansee, I've been watching your videos for a while, and I finally have a story to share with you. This one isn't mine, but it happened to a classmate of mine back when I was in year 9. I'll do my best to retell it the way it was told to me. For privacy reasons, let's call him Andrew. It all started at the end of a normal school day. Most of the students at our school would take public transport home. Buses, trams, trains, you name it. Andrew was Asian, tall, pretty built, and very popular. After school, he'd usually hang out with friends or go on dates. But on this day, he decided to head home with his younger brother, who was in year 7. We'll call his brother Ben. When they got on the bus, Andrew sat near the back, and Ben went all the way to the last row to sit with his friends. Everything seemed normal until the bus made another stop. That's when he got on. A large boy, maybe 16 or 17, towering over everyone, stepped onto the bus. He had a long scar running down the side of his face, and he wasn't wearing a school uniform, which meant he didn't go to our school. As he stepped on, he was muttering to himself, pacing the aisle slowly like he couldn't decide where to sit. Andrew didn't think much of it. He just kept looking down at his phone. The boy walked down the aisle of the bus and sat next to Andrew, and without warning, swung a fist right at Andrew's head. The punch connected. Andrew was caught off guard, but snapped out of it, furious and ready to fight back. But before he could do anything, the boy just turned around and stormed toward the back of the bus, where Ben and his friends were sitting. I should probably mention, Ben was short, quiet, and definitely not someone who could defend himself in a fight. The boy tried to hit Ben, but just before he could land a punch, an elderly woman sitting near the front of the bus shouted at him, demanding he stop. He turned, furious, and punched the woman in the face. At this point, the bus was in total chaos. Andrew was frozen, trying to make sense of what was happening. This guy had to be mentally unstable. That was the only explanation. But it wasn't over. The boy made his way toward the bus driver, fists clenched, and tried to hit him while he was driving. That nearly caused a full-on crash. Thankfully, at the next stop, 2 security guards, who had been contacted by the driver during all the commotion, were already waiting. They stepped onto the bus and blocked the aisle, trying to calm the boy down. It turned out to be a big mistake. The moment he saw them, the boy snapped again, swinging wildly at both guards. A full-on brawl broke out right there in the aisle. The guards managed to wrestle him to the floor and held him down while the rest of the passengers, including Andrew, Ben, and the driver, evacuated the bus. A few minutes later, the police arrived. You'd think he'd calmed down at this point, seeing armed officers, but no, he didn't care. As soon as one of the guards loosened their grip, the boy lunged at one of the cops, and that's when it ended. Another officer immediately pulled out a taser and fired. The boy collapsed, convulsing on the pavement before being restrained and cuffed. He was arrested on the spot. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt. Not Andrew, not Ben, and not even the elderly woman. But to this day, we all wonder what would have happened if the guards or the police hadn't shown up in time. Or worse, if that bus, full of people, had crashed. Hello, my name is Mai Britt. I'm a woman from Norway, and this is a true story that happened to me a long time ago. I was 18 at the time, and I had just moved in with my partner, Alex. We loved going out exploring, to the mall, cafes, anywhere at all during the day. But one day, we decided to come home a little earlier than usual, and looking back, I'm really glad we did. When we got home, I locked the door, or at least I thought I did. You see, I'm hard of hearing, and sometimes I forget to check if I've actually locked the door, especially since I'm always the one who walks in last. That day, we didn't think much of it. We just sat down to watch TV like usual, until we heard loud screaming. It was coming from our neighbors. She lived in the apartment right next to us, and we were used to hearing her yelling at odd hours, especially in the middle of the night. Doors slamming, things breaking, but this time, it was during the day. Alex heard footsteps in the hallway, and then suddenly, he turned the TV off. We both went quiet, and that's when we heard it. Someone was at our front door, stabbing it, over and over again. We froze. Alex looked at me and whispered,
Oh no, I might have forgotten to lock it.
My heart dropped. I crept slowly to the door and checked. It was locked, thank God. Then came the screaming.
Let me in! Open the door!
She was screaming, swearing, stabbing the door again and again. We could hear the metal scraping as she carved X's into the wood. She even went to another neighbor's door. She sounded furious through the locked door, and she was determined to get inside. She started kicking the door, slamming her body against it, and shouting,
Open the door!
I told Alex frantically.
Call the police, now!
He did, and he told the operator.
Our neighbor is trying to break in. She's stabbing the door. Please send help.
The operator asked if we could see anything.
Do you have a peephole or window to look through?
We said no, but we told her.
It has to be a knife or some sharp weapon. She's hitting the door hard.
I started crying while Alex stayed on the line. We waited and waited. And then we heard the police sirens in the distance, getting closer and closer. They caught her right outside our door, still holding the knife. She didn't even run. They took her into custody immediately. Later, we found out she was evicted and placed into rehabilitation, and we never saw her again. My name is Sparsh. This incident happened when I was 15 years old. My parents were out of town on vacation celebrating their anniversary. They wanted me to come with them, but I had exams the following week, so I stayed back home alone. My mom, being the protective person she is, asked her friend from society to send her son, Soohyeon, to stay with me. Soohyeon was 18 years old. I also have an older brother who was 23 at the time, but he was working in a different state. He was planning to come home in a few days. The first 3 days went by smoothly. Soohyeon and I had a lot of fun, nothing out of the ordinary. Then came the night before my brother's return. He told me he'd be arriving early in the morning, around 4 a.m. So I thought, why not just stay up all night and study? Since I didn't want any distractions, I told Soohyeon not to stay over that night. After dinner, I got comfortable and started studying. It was 10 p.m., everything was fine. I kept my head in the books for another few hours until around 2:20 or 2:25 a.m. I suddenly heard a loud crash coming from the second floor. It sounded like something very heavy had fallen. At first, I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but then I heard footsteps. My heart dropped. I froze for a moment, trying to process what I'd just heard. Now, the second floor of my house isn't connected to the first floor. There's no interior staircase. That meant whoever or whatever was up there didn't come from inside. It must have entered through the terrace or balcony. Panicked, I turned the TV on full volume and started talking loudly to myself, trying to make it seem like I wasn't alone. I kept that act going for a whole hour. Then I grabbed a bag, double-locked the main door, and pushed a sofa in front of it. I sat there, bat in hand, terrified. I don't even remember falling asleep. Next thing I knew, the doorbell rang. I jolted awake. It was morning, and that had to be my brother. Still nervous, I opened the door just a crack to check, and thankfully, it was him. I told him everything, and together we went upstairs to check, and what we saw shook me to my core. The entire second floor was a mess. Clothes and belongings were scattered everywhere. But the worst part, there was a knife on the floor. A knife that didn't belong to us. It looked like the intruder had tripped over something, dropped the knife, and made a run for it. We called the police. They found no other evidence, but they did take the knife for fingerprint analysis. 1 month later, there was a robbery and a murder in our society. The police believe it was the same person, and he was still out there. Since then, everyone, including us, installed CCTV cameras in our homes. Our society now has 2 security guards on duty full time. But even with all that, I still get chills thinking about that night. Because if I had gone to sleep early like I usually do, I don't know if I'd be here to tell this story.